Kia ora, I'm Emily Perkins and I'm a writer from New Zealand. I'm going to tell you a little bit today about my new novel Lioness, which is coming out in July with Bloomsbury. So at its core, I think Lioness is a story about whether or not a woman can change her life and what's in the way of her making those changes, and if she can make them, what it might cost her. So Therese, the main character, has married into wealth when she was quite a young woman, and the novel picks her up 30 years later as she's hitting her 50s and her life begins to destabilise. Her much older husband, Trevor, is a successful property developer, and in the course of the novel he comes under investigation for a series of past business dealings. Therese is at the same time drawn to her downstairs neighbour, a woman called Claire, who seems to have undergone her own kind of midlife change. And Therese is really compelled by this and also disturbed by it. So the question for Therese is whether she's going to leave Trevor's world and become immersed in Claire's, and if she is that just swapping one charismatic figure for another, and what does it mean for who she is? So one of the engines underneath the story for me is what happens to a woman when she starts to realise that the forces that have shaped her are not necessarily in her best interests, when she's been complicit and gone along with certain things in a pursuit of comfort and security, and what she might do about changing that. The character of Claire is somebody who embodies a kind of sense of authenticity and freedom that Therese is drawn to. In her apartment she creates this sort of zone of permission and a place of ecstatic release, and one of the questions I was interested in was whether or not that's sustainable. There were a few touchstones for me in the writing of this novel, and I want to show you some of them because my process is quite visual. But also in terms of reading, I was really inspired by the Elena Ferrante novel Days of Abandonment, I think because it's so intense and tells a story about a woman under pressure in a really exciting way. And I also was particularly drawn to the paintings of Paula Rego, especially the ones which look at the lives of girls and women and their positions in their family and the kind of mythic status that she imbues those pictures with. A backbone of this story, which kind of features in a funny way in the novel, is the Greek myth of Atalanta, and particularly the story of her with the golden apples. I was also super drawn to this, I don't know if you can see it, this postcard, which is a still from an art video by the great artist Pipilotti Rist, who had a really amazing show at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney a few years ago. Some of you in Sydney might have seen. I just adored that show. I went a couple of times, and this clip in particular is from a piece called Ever Is Overall, I think. I've got to check that. Yeah, Ever Is Overall. And it shows this woman in beautiful summer dress with her hair in a ponytail and a pair of great shoes on, walking down a suburban or city street carrying what looks like maybe a red hot poker, like a flower, but also looks a bit like a weapon, and suddenly and unexpectedly she swings it and smashes the driver's windows of the cars as she passes them, the parked cars. And I think it was that combination of her femininity and her kind of lightness and this gleefully destructive act that really appealed to me. So I put that in the novel too. Therese goes to that exhibition and sees this video right at the start of the novel, but she doesn't yet understand what it means, and it's only later that I think the significance of those juxtapositions comes to be felt. Okay, so just before I do a reading from the novel, a short one, I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I trained at drama school, and then my first book was published in the 90s. I've been publishing fiction for a long time. My last one was called The Forests, and since then I've turned slightly towards drama. I've been writing plays, I've had a couple of stage plays produced, and I co-wrote the feature film based on Eleanor Catton's novel The Rehearsal with the director Alison MacLean. But novels really are my passion, and I've been working on Lioness for a while, and I'm so excited that it's about to come out into the world. just to set this up as a reminder, Therese, who is, embodies this life of wealth and privilege, has begun to fall under the spell of her neighbour, Claire, who's already experienced her own kind of reckoning. And Therese thinks that Claire perhaps will help her lead a more authentic kind of life. So this short reading is from a scene when the women are drinking together and Claire's finally telling Therese about the changes she's made in her own life and how they came about. And these changes started with her deciding to swap domestic roles and responsibilities with her husband, who's called Mick. And they have a daughter called Alex, who's about 19 or 20. So just those are the key names, Claire, Mick and Alex. And this is being told, as is the rest of the novel, by Therese. Once they swapped roles, she told me, their sex life heated up. And when she drove them up the coast for weekend walks, she felt elated behind the wheel, surging to overtake trucks as though the only thing she'd ever feared about driving was her own power. She saw how Alex enjoyed the new closeness with Mick. It was a relief not to be the one trying to steer her daughter's choices without revealing her hidden agenda. She adored Mick's calmness, the baseline assumption of a person with practical skills that things would be all right. On the downside, there were the bills and the rubbish and the car and the maintenance, and he still called her 5 times from the supermarket to check he was getting the right thing. I mean, am I really that controlling, she said, and drained her glass. Rhetorical. They were trying, and yet. She struggled to achieve a similar deprogramming at work. It was hard enough to go to cold turkey on exclamation marks, all good if not, and non-essential apologies. Her job was to get money for various causes out of high net worth individuals. Supplication was an ingrained mode, not easily unlearned. The sight of her emails without the usual emollients made her feel faint. This I could relate to. I opened the second bottle of wine. And then, she said, there was age. It was as if no one else was getting older, Claire told me. Only her. No one else was swept up in the river of time. She alone lay awake in the middle of the night as electric currents rippled her limbs, her heart snagging for no reason, thinking about why she had been a follower all her life. Thinking that all this wide-eyed wonder at the world had been supposed to keep her young. But here she was, aging anyway. She swam length after length at the local pool, striving to just be a body, to still her mind, to let the little word strings go, but words were everywhere, and no good. Her sister had another take. Well, she told me I wasn't depressed, I was angry. Were you? She was depressed and angry. It was pointless. No, it wasn't. Life was a miracle, joyous. She was in love with the crystal droplets on the morning twigs before the wind came to shatter them. She loved the glossy birds, the red maple, the bowl of harbour, her imperturbable husband, their mysterious daughter, who was in the ascendant, who had not yet met time. Mick had gone bald, so that was his price paid. But the rubbish that blew through the streets and the way it was all wrong everywhere. How did people not go mad, she asked me now. Why did they not care? Why didn't they all just storm something? Perhaps this was menopause, but everyone she knew was only in perimenopause. Peri, we said to each other, clinging to those letters as though they were a strand of pearls, sexual relevance, those last 4 precious pearls. Menopause is one of those catch-all diagnoses, she said, like when you have a baby you can't comfort, and you blame everything on teething because nothing else could be making you cry. So that's all from me and Lioness. I hope you enjoy reading it, and thanks very much for asking me on to talk about it.